real stuff. So I love it. And so I love the free flow conversation too. You were just saying how you love just kind of showing up and being present in the moment.
Yeah, being present in the moment works so much better for me because it gets me out of my head and I drop down into my heart. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, when they're fearful, they think they have to think the right thing. And then they're so busy with what's going on in their head that they forget what's true in their soul and they don't speak from their heart. So when I do my coaching, I do it over the phone, not on Zoom, because people tend to be much more vulnerable and honest and really get into their heart and their soul when somebody's not looking at them.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. I never thought about it that way. I love being able to see people's expressions. I'm a huge like video person, and I do video calls specifically so I can see their expression, like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then I can kind of read the situations. Whereas on the phone, I'm always like the one in my head going, hello?
Yeah, well, I'm trained really well. I've been trained, and I think I have a really good intuition in hearing the way people are talking, listening for their pauses, when their breath changes, when their voice, when they start talking faster or slower. So I really have this gift to hear what people are saying as well as what they're not saying.
That's amazing. I love that. So is that training in your coaching that you've had, or just other kinds of trainings that you've learned how to really pick up on, like the social cues and the things that people are actually doing in conversations?
Well, there was some training on that in my coach's training program. But I was a hairdresser for 27 years before I became a certified life coach. So I was the original life coach sitting behind the chair. And while they were sitting in front of a mirror and I could look at them, I was always focused on what I was doing when I was cutting. And so I wasn't looking at their expressions. And so I think that really helped me tune into that as well.
That's true. That's true. You had to really pay attention. You had to really listen while you were doing the other thing. So you had to multitask, which I definitely noticed that about hairdressers. Like,
and it's actually kind of that other thing too. Like, I don't know if you ever, like for me, if I'm listening to a podcast, when I'm driving, I hear the podcast that much better because the other part of my brain is doing something. And, or if I'm knitting or cleaning, you know, like it's sort of two different parts of your brain. And so when I have that other side occupied, I can just listen better and not get, distracted with my thoughts.
Yeah. Maybe that's why people have a lot of great ideas in the shower.
Yeah.
You're shampooing your hair, you're doing something that's kind of like on autopilot, like same thing with driving. Like, you don't really have to think about it. You have to be aware, but you're not really thinking about it because it's such a routine thing that you do, that's when our ideas come through, because we're like using
that memory muscle is keeping the other part of your brain situated. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true.
Very cool. Well, awesome. Well, thank you, Bonnie. So I'm going to just formally introduce everyone to you now and just give them a little background on you now that we know that you do coaching. That's awesome. And some little fun commentary at the beginning there. But for those of you tuning in, this is Bonnie McVee. She is a speaker, life coach with McVee Coaching. And Bonnie always gives high value presentations that are energetic, motivating, encouraging, and fun. I can definitely tell you that she's fun. I'm excited for her to be here with us today. And she has designed for people, she designs for people more joy, to get more joy out of their life by owning their significance with, which also allows them to be curious in facing the fears and to bring more joy in their life. So Bonnie has been in business for 15 years as a life coach. Prior to that, as she said, she was a hairdresser for 25 years. She is a cancer survivor. She has been inspiring and empowering women to see people to see people for what is possible for them in their lives for over 40 years. Due to the method of her coaching, she is able to coach people for many walks of life and has joyfully watched their lives explode with joy. I'm so excited for you to be here, Bonnie, and tell us more about your story. And so first of all, I love to just start out with something more relatable and interesting about you that people really wouldn't know unless we kind of dove into connecting with you more. So tell us an interesting fact about you and your life.
An interesting fact about me and my life. I learned to ride a horse at age 57. And I don't mean just ride a horse, because I had ridden horses before, but actually really learning what it takes to ride a horse properly and be in control of that horse. And it was a really interesting challenge for me at that age, both physically, because getting your seat when you ride is something that when you're older and you have to learn how to use that muscle that you've not used before, takes quite some time. And it was a mentally challenging endeavor as well to connect with the horse, because, you know, horses instinctively know your energy. And so when you show up to ride and your mind is somewhere else, your horse knows that, and your horse does something else. So it was such a great learning for me.
That's cool. I've hopped up on a horse before, but I definitely have never learned how to properly ride a horse. And I mean, it sounds like more or less like you were taught how to guide a horse, like how to actually do everything so that you are, you know, guiding your horse for what you want.
Right.
And that's a really good distinction of, you know, you probably rode a horse, but did you really know what you were doing and how to take the steps from there to really communicate with the horse? That is a whole new level. That's super cool.
Yeah.
So what made you do that at 57? Was it something that was already planned and you were just like, I'll just try it? Or how did that come about?
It's part of my story. So you did mention that I had cancer.
Yes.
And the house that we lived in while I had cancer, I had a big picture window just outside my bedroom. And excuse me, across the field, which was just across our driveway, was the fence for that field. And I was really sick from the chemo, and I slept a lot. And when I would wake and kind of start stirring to wake up and maybe have somebody come and help take me to the bathroom, these horses would show up at the fence. And they would just stand there and watch. They could see into my window and they would just watch. And my husband or my daughter would come and take me to go to the bathroom or whatever. And I'd get back in bed. And as I settled down with my head back on the pillow, watching those horses, once I was back in bed, those horses slowly turned away. It was like we were energetically connected. And he had known me from, you know, feeding him over the fence and whatnot before, but it was just like this amazing connection with these horses. And so I said that at that point, I said, I want to get a horse. So fast forward several years, about 8 or 9 years, my mother passed away and left some money. And so I purchased a horse and purchased the place to keep the horse and started taking lessons.
Yeah.
And it was a grieving process for me to be with that horse that I was able to get from my mother. And so with that horse, I was with my mother in a sense, and using that horse, you know, because you're so connected, as a living being to help me through that grief in a way that no one else could really know what I was feeling, because horses do. And then learning to ride that horse and learning to become one with that horse. So that's where that whole thing started from.
Wow. That is amazing. I swear there's a movie that's very similar. I think it may be called The Horse Whisperer, that like, I think she loses her mom and then she connects with the horse. And they talk about like that grieving process. Like horses seem to be very like, energetic, connecting kind of creatures that they, like you said before, they know where your head's at. Like if you're not fully present in in the moment with them, then they feel that.
Yes. Yes.
So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Do you still have that horse?
I do not have that horse anymore.
Okay.
I have passed him along. He has a new mommy, and I still get to go visit him and ride him though. So
That's awesome. So cool.
He's not mine, but he's still kind of mine.
Yes, absolutely. You got to have an amazing experience with that horse. That's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, okay, so let's dive in about fear, and tell us about a significant time in your life that you want to talk about that fear held you back from living your life fully.
Okay, so fear always really held me back in my whole life. And I was fearful of not being accepted in life. So I had an abandonment from a biological father at a very young age, which led to feeling worthless, insignificant, like why wouldn't my daddy want me anymore, kind of a thing. And it followed me through my my life as a young child. I had these feelings that I didn't know how to process. So I turned to food, and I ended up being a very obese teenager. And then once I kind of got to the age where boys were kind of interesting, I was able to diet my way through losing that weight, which I really wouldn't recommend. Dieting all those years was not good. And then once I sort of felt like I had it under control, my addiction turned to alcohol. And then I numbed myself for a lot of years with the alcohol.
Yeah.
And so I got sober and decided to become a life coach. And halfway through my life coach training program, which was a year-long program, Rebecca, I received my cancer diagnosis. And I had always sort of had this fearful, people-pleasing attitude of myself because of my fear of being insignificant and not enough. And that sent me into a victimhood mentality. And
Sure.
When I got into my coach's training program for being a life coach, I learned about limiting beliefs, what those beliefs are that we believe about ourselves, and how we subconsciously make our choices from there. Hence, I had 2 divorces. And I realized there was another place to come from. And that was my essence, my core of who I truly am at my being, not what I thought other people's values of me were. And getting a cancer diagnosis is a very fearful place to be. And it would have been very easy for me to choose being a victim and in victimhood and woe was me. And I knew that that's not what I wanted. I was newly married. I had only been married 7 months, and I had 2 teenage daughters, and I did not want all of them to live in that fear either. And so I chose joy. And each day, my only accomplishment was to find joy when I was going through through my cancer journey. And that forced me to become really present in the moment. Again, why I like to not have my head full of stuff, right? And so I chose joy, and that really changed how my family dealt with my cancer journey, and particularly my new husband. And it was being intentional to choose, being aware first of where I was coming from, and then intentionally choosing who and how I wanted to be that day.
Yeah. Wow. It's so interesting because this is episode 41. I've heard of a lot of stories over the last couple months, and a lot of them have to do with, when trauma or very big things like cancer treatments and stuff are in play, that it resorts back to those very simplistic things of finding simple joys in everyday things, which is something that everyone needs to do, but it takes those really big monumental shifts to make it just down so simple these days that people are just like, okay, I need to find something that's really joyful in a day. And think about how happy everyone would be if we
Right.
just found one thing to be really joyful about in a day can
Right.
just change everything.
Yes.
So
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Even
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to say, even like I remember driving to one of my chemo appointments, and my journey started out in late fall and into the winter, and just getting in the car and having warm air at my feet and feeling, feeling warmth, thinking there are people in the world that don't have warmth, and
Absolutely.
simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask too. So when was your cancer treatment stuff? What year was that?
That was 15 years ago. This July is when I was diagnosed, so it'll be 15 years. Yep.
Okay. So have you been cancer free now since your treatment?
Yes.
Very good. Yay. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And what kind of cancer was it?
It was breast cancer.
Breast cancer. Okay. Very good. I did not know that. Okay. So when the fear of, all of the unknown and all of the things that were happening, when the fear was holding you down during those times, where were you mentally and how did you feel about yourself during that time?
Well, that was another really interesting thing that my cancer journey brought me. So the other thing I learned in my coaches training program is how important it is to be in the now. So really staying present and not going out into the future of all the what ifs. Am I going to die? So if I just stayed in today, I was okay. I didn't have the fear because I had everything I needed in that day. I had a roof over my head. I had a family that loved me. And I was getting the best treatments I could get. And so there was nothing to fear in that day. So really staying present in the day. I think that what people don't realize is when they are full of fear, they are in the future. So they are future tripping. And most of what people obsess over never even happens. It only
Right.
happens in their mind. And
Yep.
and we are designed for that because we have a fight or flight,
Right.
right, mentality. And so
Yeah.
we feel like we have to be ready to either run or fight the good fight. But in the very moment, most of us have nothing to fear or flight from.
Yep, exactly. And I think that's where, if we let those fears just sit there, that's when it manifests into this really big thing. It might just be kind of a nervous thing. And then it just grows to like this actual fear of something that's going to stop you from progressing in whatever that fear is based around, why you have it. But being aware of it, like you said, is like the number one thing. People have to be aware of why is the fear there in the
Mm-hmm.
first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a scientist by the name of Bruce Lipton, and he studies cellular biology. And
Okay.
we are all cellular. Every single bit of us is a cellular. And the thoughts and the thoughts that we have turn into feelings, and those feelings affect us down to the teeny tiniest little cell in our body. So when you're fearful, your body is already stressing out because it's like, okay, I'm getting ready. I either have to run or I have to fight.
That's true.
And when you're in joy, your body relaxes. And it's such a good place to be when you're wanting to heal something.
Yeah.
Because then your cells are not all closed up. They can then do what they're meant to do, and that is to heal the body.
Yeah. So you did your training and then you got your diagnosis and went through this stuff. So you already like had a good mindset of like how to work through this stuff. Is that right?
I was halfway through my training, yes. But fortunately, we had gotten to this point. I had gotten to this point, which then so changed the ending for me. And I was able to finish my class and graduate with my class at the end of the 6 months that was left from my year-long training.
Wow, that's so cool. That's
Yeah.
amazing to think like how that changed your outlook and the thought process that you had during your journey with all of that. Like, it is very interesting to think that how you were going through your program and the thoughts that would have been totally different
Yes.
had any part of that been different.
Yes. That's absolutely true. And I really think, our minds are powerful things. God gave us
Yeah.
these great minds for a reason. And unfortunately, most of us live subconsciously day in and day out without giving a thought to why we do the things we do.
Yes. We're very reactive.
Very reactive, yes. And so learning to be intentional and responding rather than reacting, particularly in the face of fear, is huge.
Yeah.
And that fear can be anything. It can be getting on a phone call with somebody. It can be giving a speech. It can be, flying in an airplane. It can be a cancer journey. It can be, anything.
Right.
So powerful to really stop and question, why am I thinking what I'm thinking, and where did these thoughts come from? A lot of times our belief systems come from people that put them on us about who they thought we were. And as young people, we don't know any better. And so we never stop to question it. And that as we grow older and that has had all this time to resonate inside of us, it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And we really need to question where those beliefs came from. And then, do we really believe it? Or is that just a subconscious thought that's been in our mind for so long?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Is it your thought or someone else's that's just sat there for long enough that you think it's your own?
Exactly.
Yeah. So when you do break free from the fear and you move into new directions, sometimes, our friendships and our relationships, they do shift and change too. How did that show up for you in your situation?
Friendships shifting.
Friendships, relationships, yeah.
Yeah. So my husband and I had only been married about 7 months. I had 2 divorces prior to that. Totally changed the way I communicate with him, and thus how our relationship is. I would say that's probably the biggest one. And so by being intentional and choosing our thoughts, knowing who we are at our core, being aware of what triggers our limiting beliefs about ourselves, that send us into a survival, really stopping and thinking, now, where is that what he's coming from him, and how am I going to take that in? And if he says something like, well, you didn't load the dishwasher right, I can get defensive, because if I'm fearful, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't load it right, let me redo it. Or I can say, oh, yeah, well, I guess we do those 2 things differently. Like, responding rather than reacting.
Yeah.
That showed up in a lot in our relationship in a lot of ways, and really has helped our communication, because then if I'm not sure, I clarify. I say, I heard you say, the story I'm making up about it is that makes me feel like this. Can you tell me what you meant? And he'll be like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you even got that from that, right? But that's where my subconscious mind took me. So really clear.
Yeah. We just think so differently, especially men and women.
Right.
Yeah, that's so true. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially with you guys being so newlywed, like everything changed really fast in your marriage.
Yes.
You had to adjust to it, and communication absolutely would have to follow all of that, because what else do you need to do but then figure it out?
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Was there any other relationships that changed for you?
I would say that I had some friendships that I had to let go of.
Yeah. just weren't as strong as you thought they'd be for the next level of your life, right? Like,
Exactly. And just the fact that, some people are just more toxic, more negative, and they can't change what they don't see. And if they're not willing to look, then they don't bring joy to my life. The other thing too, Rebecca, is having gone through a cancer diagnosis, you realize how quickly life can change and how short it really is. And then who do I want to spend my time with? So yes,
yeah,
I did
absolutely.
have relationships that went by the way.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. That's true. And we can only, like you said, if they don't want to see it, then there's nothing you can do because we don't know what we don't know until we do know it. And if we don't want to know, then we're not going to know.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, with spending time with people, again, I'm so glad that you're here. So thank you for spending your time with us today.
Yes.
So the question that I would ask next is what compelled you to jump ship from having the fear? So obviously, I mean, you were going through your cancer treatments and stuff like that, so that you can't really jump ship from it necessarily, but working through it more and more. So what really held you back from jumping ship from having the fear faster?
Not knowing who I really was and who other people saw me as. So we don't. One of the things I do when I first start working with somebody, and this is obviously a exercise I went through, is a self-realization exercise, and I have people ask 7 to 10 people, and not family members, because family members see us differently.
Yeah.
A question of what shows up when I do, what qualities do I bring into a room? And they write down everything they say. They bring that to me. I look at it. I distill it down to their essence of essence. And every time I give a woman her essence and tell her who she truly is and how the world perceives her, she cries. Because
Sure.
generally who we've wanted to be all along, we just couldn't see it for ourselves because we are looking through glasses of all of those things that people put on us when we were younger that we believed because we didn't question. And we all tend to be feel insignificant. And once we hear how other people see us and start living from there, the fear just naturally melts away.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely like that mirror that we were talking about. Like, excuse me, you actually like have the reassurance that that is who you are. And that translates very much into what I do with my photography. I show women what I see through my camera and then I show them and they're just blown away. And it's very much like what you're saying. They don't see it until it's shown in a different way.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
so
so
cool.
I imagine that when you do that photography and they see these pictures of themselves, they walk out of there holding themselves much differently than when they walked in.
Oh yeah.
And that translates into all of their relationships in their life.
Yep. Absolutely. 100%. That is my favorite part is the transformation.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Yeah.
How nervous, timid, whatever you want to say they are in the beginning of being in front of a camera and then walking out, they're just like, I have my clients actually write a thank you note to themselves before they leave for having the experience to do, like spend a day for themselves. And when they come back to pick up their pictures, they get that, whether they want to open it that day or not, is up to them. It's for them to open it when they need the reminder to take, to love themselves more. And anytime they do, they cry.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
in front of me.
Yeah.
And that just reassures, like, you're helping people really see themselves in a different way that they need to. We need to see ourselves more and be more present about who we are and not who the outside people think we are.
Exactly.
I love that. I love that. That's awesome. So is the getting down to the essence part, is that part of what you do for coaching?
Yes. So
Okay.
the other piece to that is I take them through another exercise that helps me see what their limiting beliefs are about themselves. And I name those and I give them some really crazy names. So somebody might be a self-righteous drama queen, or somebody might be a Debbie Downer, or Vicky Victim, or the town idiot, or, all those things that we think about ourselves, right?
Yep.
So they have on this side their essence of who they truly are. And those might be, like for me, mine is wisdom, delight, devotion, and love. So I used to be a self-righteous drama queen, right? Because I had to be like I was a victim, there's the drama queen, and then I felt less than, so I always had to be self-righteous, because that made me feel better. So if I am in a situation where my fear is triggered, I would often show up as a self-righteous drama queen. And as opposed to showing up in wisdom. So as a self-righteous drama queen, who you see me be is not going to be authentic. It's not going to be very attractive, and it's not going to be very loving. But if I show up as wisdom, I can take in what I've heard. I can think about it. I can intentionally respond from love. And it's a whole different situation. And that is a perfect example of my previous marriages to the marriage I have now, right? So a self-righteous drama queen as a wife is not a good place to be.
No.
Mountain myself here.
Yeah.
A wife who can show up in a conversation, in a relationship, coming from wisdom and joy and love is going to be so completely different. So when I work with people and they're trying to do things outside of their comfort zone, which is anything new,
right?
Why people usually come to a coach, because they're trying to accomplish something. We look at what happened without judgment or blame or shame. Did your limiting belief, your survival behavior show up? What happened? Or did you show up? Okay, so let's say it showed up that way. And then I'll say to them, okay, so if you knew how you would show up coming from here, how would that be? And they'll be like, well, I would. And it's a completely different thing than what had happened previously.
Right.
So a lot of times in coaching, we look at what happened, what's missing, and what's next. A lot of times what's missing is their essence. They're being true to themselves, who they truly are, by intentionally being aware of that. And so that is like a huge thing when somebody's in fear, right?
Absolutely.
To show up in their essence and be strong in who they are. And so we look at that as they're moving forward and really coaching them to really own and stand into their essence, their core of who they are, rather than subconsciously living from those limiting beliefs that drove their bus for years and years and years.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that. That's so true. And I mean, that is perception, right? It's how we perceive different things in different situations and how others do. So it makes total sense. And I love that you name them weird names, because then it's like your reality check. You'll think of that right away, be like, oh, that was kind of dramatic. I'm like, oh, there she is.
Yep, exactly. And so then they can continue that awareness and continue to choose differently. Continue to intentionally choose.
I love that you keep saying intentional, because that is actually my word for the year.
Is it?
It
Interesting.
is. I'm very intentional this year. I love it. That's awesome.
Well, I would love to give you your limiting belief names and your essence names if you would ever want to go through that process with me. It's really fun.
Yeah, that does sound super fun. I would love to know that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so surrounding fear, what advice would you give the viewers for moving through fear? Because as we've talked about, and they've heard from past episodes, right? Like, Live Fearlessly isn't about having no fear. It's about having it every day in some way, shape, or form, but knowing how to move through it and address it. So what advice would you give? You've gave a lot of advice, but what advice would you maybe give the viewers for overcoming fear in general?
Overcoming fear in general. So you need to question where it's coming from. Is it true or not? Is it made up? Start with that. If it's true that you're fearful that you're going to go out and do something that you've never done before, tapping into who you are at your core and being courageous to be you in the face of fear will then instill joy. So my tagline is instilling courage and igniting joy. So that joy just naturally comes when you take on and own who you really are.
Yep. Absolutely. Yay, I love that. No wonder we're such a match made. I love that. Everything that you say, I'm just like, that's what I basically say for my photography and how I pull my things together. And that's
Oh, great.
building the confidence is so important in helping women especially
Yes.
see their beauty for what it really is, not the external stuff, but
Right.
really who they are.
Yeah.
I
Right.
love
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, so my last question for the interview properly is you now, I mean, you've lived a lot of experiences that you've moved through fear, right? So now that you know how to live fearlessly through those things, where do you see yourself 5 years from today?
I see myself having a big presence as a speaker. So that is something that I've only done a little bit of. And so, yeah, that's outside of my comfort zone. And yeah, fear shows up. However, I'm going to show up in that space as me with my story. And nobody can tell me it's wrong, right? So I see myself really growing my business. I really want to get out there and speak, is to teach these women and empower them to really own themselves and know that they are significant in this world.
Absolutely. And I never asked, Bonnie, but where are you tuning in from?
I'm in the Pacific Northwest. I'm just outside of Seattle in Washington State.
Okay, perfect. I love everyone knowing where everyone's coming from because, hey, where is the best place to connect with you?
Currently, I have just put up my website. I've not been in the online business world before. So my website is
Congrats.
McVeecoaching.com. And it's McVeecoaching.com. Again, another fearful thing to do, to put yourself out there in the world like that. And done is better than perfect. So
Yeah,
I'm still working on it, but it's there and they can connect with me there. And I'm
perfect.
also McVee Coaching on Instagram.
Okay,
McVee
awesome.
Coaching on Instagram and McVee
Website.
Coaching is my website.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Bonnie, thank you so much for your time. This was absolutely amazing. And just for cred here, Bonnie didn't see any of these questions beforehand and we just free flowed this whole thing. So she's amazing. And I love that we did that. I may have to do that more, hold the questions from people and we just talk because I love that you did that and that it was just, it's really who you are and you're, not to say it wasn't from anybody else. It's just, it's nice to not have to have the stress of, did I say that right? Is that it? It's your story. And I love that you just own it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks
So
for
thank
that.
you very much for your time.
It
This
was
was
very
fantastic.
fun. Yeah.
And anyone that's watching, remember to love yourself and live fearlessly. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.